Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs, presented by BDO Canada. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Mike Newton, our accountant emeritus on the program. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Today on the program, we're talking pizza, but very refined pizza. In our conversation, we get to a hard truth. Montreal didn't have the best pizza. And a few spots came along, and one was particularly successful, called Pizza Number 900. Became a big chain. They've expanded to Ontario and even to France. And they even have a really important certification from the region in Italy where this particular kind of pizza is made. So Pizza Number 900 is really a unique Quebec success story, and we'll be speaking with Alexandre Brunet, co-founder of it, on the program today. Pretty interesting story.
Very much so. I also find it interesting that Quebecois is importing pizza back into Europe. So, you know, just that element right there says something about what he's producing.
It's so funny. I mean, he's going to talk about going to Italy to source some of his ingredients. Then the knowledge comes back to Quebec, and they're sending it back to France now. Interesting that he's having so much success around the world. And later in the show, during our debrief segment, we're going to talk, Mike, about taxing and tips, which is very complicated, and there's a lot of talk about it politically. We'll figure out what the correct procedures are later in the program. But first, some news and notes. And to start off, some good news on the real estate front. The Bank of Canada did cut its lending rate from 4.25% to 3.75%, so a larger cut this time. Mike, impacts on the local business community, especially on our downtown core. What do you think? Hopefully we're going to see some good news out of this, more building in the coming months?
Yeah, I think this is obviously a much bigger discussion than just the real estate sector. I think it has an effect across the board, from consumerism to a whole bunch of things. I think hopefully it takes a little bit of pressure off of some of the housing market as well on a residential side for people that have seen their mortgage rates go through the roof in the last 3 or 4 years. And for a lot of people, the interest rates that they've seen in the last few years is unprecedented. I mean, for those of us that were alive back in the 70s and 80s, we saw interest rates tipping at the 20% on mortgage levels. So, you look at it, I bought my first house, it was 8.7%. And at the time in the early 90s, and I was like, well, it's not so bad. Now we hit 6% on the mortgage, and the world came apart. So I think for a lot of people this is a huge sigh of relief. The big question at this point is, I think that 50 basis points was already built into the market. The question is, are we going to see another one? Rumor is that we may see another one sometime in the spring. Whether it's I don't think we'll see 50 basis points again, but we might see another 25 points, which hopefully continues to stimulate things. But again, it's all going to depend on what the economy does in terms of inflation, and monetary policy and interest rates is a really complex exercise.
But indicators are at least going in the right direction, right? I mean, inflation is staying at around 2%. Is this a sign that things are really beginning to turn around in a meaningful way, that we're going to start our meaningful recovery like the States?
So the glass half full of me says yes. The glass half empty says, look at what happened in the U.S. in the last little while as the inflation has started to kick back again, and that the interest rate drops did not continue in the U.S. So, we've got to be very careful. I mean, there's so many factors at play. Not to mention we've got some, political implications south of the border right now with the election coming up, and it's not so simple to sit back and watch the House in Canada and everybody start asking Mr. Trudeau whether he should resign as well. So I think there's some political instability going forward that's going to continue to play havoc with exactly where this goes.
Yeah, I expect that to endure for some time at least, but we won't get into politics on this show. Let's talk about intergenerational dynamics in the workforce, one of our favorite topics. And this piece from Forbes, 3 reasons Gen Z is getting fired from the workplace. What are some of these reasons, according to Forbes?
So, it's an interesting segment, and there's been a lot of writing about this recently, so it's not just this article. Basically, 60% of employers have admitted to firing Gen Z employees that they've hired this year. There seems to be a kind of a contradictory... we went through this to a certain degree with the millennials. They're lazy, they don't want to work, they lack motivation. You got to say that for that group that came in, and most of of these Gen Zers, basically came into the workforce in and around COVID. Life has never been the same. It's a whole different perspective. Many of them, didn't see another, fellow worker for 2 years face to face. They may have been hired on screen. They may have been working from home. They may have lacked guidance. So the lack of motivation is twofold here. One of them is, I think, a lack of guidance, a lack of coaching, a lack of mentoring, a lack of onboarding, that whole exercise that is just so vital to a new employee coming in, as well as, let's be honest, the last few years have been a little difficult from an employment perspective, so they're jaded on a good day, I think. The other exercise, which, is they don't speak the same language, and I mean, it's not English to French. This is speaking the same language of English to English, and it doesn't always translate. The world that they've lived in over the last few years doesn't always translate into strong interpersonal skills in a traditional work environment. They've been working from home. They haven't, to me, communication is, only partly what you say. It's body language. It's how you address things. It's your emotional intelligence that comes to all of this. Well, how can you expect somebody who's never really been put in that place, and probably the last time they did anything serious was, third year of university, to all of a sudden turn around and say, well, we want you to work in a law firm or an accounting firm or an engineering firm or anywhere else for that matter, and know how the interaction works. So there's a big gap that has to be filled in terms of understanding. And, this last piece, or the last point, really started with the millennial group, and as they reject the all work no life mentality at the end of the day. There's a rejection of traditional work cultures. It is not necessarily the 9 to 5. It's working different hours. It's working remotely, and I think we need to find a way to bridge this gap. Gen Z is more willing to prioritize personal well-being and mental health over career advancement. I'm not going to tell you. It's not the first time that I've had a number of people say to me, Mike, what about your own personal mental health? We didn't grow up with that thought process. You did what you had to do, and that's it. We've now created a group that is conscious and aware of mental health issues. Just go into the schools. Go look in the elementary schools. Go look at how these kids now, when I went to elementary school, we didn't know what mental health issue was. It's a whole different world that we're living in, and we've not done a good job of bridging the gap. I think there's a whole discussion of work-life balance. My problem always lies in is where do we find that balance between, the work systems, resilience, and, I pulled out the other day, somebody asked me, I pulled out some old timesheets in March and April when I used to do 280, 300 hours a month. I swear today, if I ask somebody to do 180 to 200 hours a month, I got to give them a week off after. So I'm not saying I was right and they're wrong, nor am I saying they're right and I'm wrong. I think we need to figure a way that we can all live in harmony. You're never going to get a 57-year-old to understand a 24-year-old philosophical approach to dealing with things. We're not supposed to. The whole exercise here is we're supposed to learn to live in harmony. We're supposed to learn to live from each other. I can learn from you. You can learn from me. Problem is when we dig our heels in and it's black or it's white, it becomes a little more complex.
Remote work or hybrid work obviously is a staple for our business. For me, it'll never be a hard team remote or team in office. It's always flexible, whatever's best for the client, and crucially, whatever gets the best work done most efficiently.
So, Dan, you hit the nail on the head. It's what's best for the client. And I think at the end of the day, this is where we need to find that middle ground. To dig your heels in and say, I'm not going to work on a weekend on a principled issue. Well, you know what? Somebody else might. You're going to lose that client, you're going to lose that business, and I think we need to find that environment, making sure you're creating an environment for customers that they want to be in, making sure that you're creating influence. You've heard me on this show many times talk about the exchange of customer service for compliance-based mentality. Well, at the end of the day, without a client, most of us don't have a job, don't have a business, and we need to find how we are going to get everybody to work together on this, because that influence is what the customer sees. It's not necessarily what you want. It's what the customer, what the client needs to see in order to get them coming back.
This next story about Canada's competitiveness from Financial Post, and without taking a position, at least on my end here, it's clear that the capital gains inclusion rate and the raising of that last year in Canada has had some effect. So this from Financial Post, the country dropped Canada from 15th to 17th out of 38 countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development on the International Tax Competitiveness Index. And this annual index is put out by the Washington, D.C.-based Tax Foundation, a think tank, which compares the code versus other OECD nations. Thoughts, Mike?
Just one of many non-competitive issues that makes doing business in Canada more complex and a little more onerous to a lot of people. We've talked in the past about bureaucracy. We've talked in the past about the red tape and the layers that we need to jump through in order to get businesses done and moving forward. We seem to have punished everybody for a few bad apples, and there's no doubt that operationally it's a challenge to do business sometimes in Canada. And the taxation, and I don't want to call it the cherry on the sundae, but maybe it's the cherry on the sundae when you start discouraging investment at the end of the day. And I'm not sure that, this whole capital gains discussion, as much as it's extremely frustrating for a lot of people, it needs to be pared down into multiple sectors and multiple layers, But I really think that entrepreneur who runs a business and has had a cash out at some point on selling the business, and who probably has to look after, multiple family members over the years, and it must do so going forward. Well, you're going to say to me, well, a $10 million gain, well, that's plenty of money at the end of the day. Well, you know what? You add another 10 points to the tax and you take off another $1 million, makes a big difference over time. And especially when competitively you can find yourself in another country with a much lower capital gains rate. Now, how do you fuel social problems? Well, you know as well as I do, Dan, that all of this is all kind of intertwined together. But I think when we start to see that the social fabric of our society is not doing as well as it should, we start to look and wonder where the excess tax dollars go. And an increase to tax is certainly a discouragement from long-term investment.
Yeah, in politics, there are decisions and consequences, and sometimes it's not completely right or wrong.
I totally agree, Dad. I don't think there is a black or white in any of this. I mean, there are so many moving parts. There's so many things that need to be addressed. But we have to be cognizant that if we were living in a vacuum, and ultimately at the end of the day there was no competition beyond our borders, then yeah, okay, you know what, you can be a little more black and white. But there are so many factors in play on an international scale, and as we talked about our guest who's selling back into the country from where, or the continent from where pizza came, it's a global world out there.
Lots more material with our guest and with you as well on the podcast edition. So do subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, or your favorite platform. 6 essential leadership skills now and how to develop them from HBR, Harvard Business Review. Mike, very interesting points here that are worth considering. Shall we go point by point here real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I can run through them quickly. I mean, the things that they're talking about developing from a leadership perspective: emotional aperture, which is the ability to understand and tune into the emotional dynamics of your people. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that feeds into the second, which is adaptive communication. And this is the hardest to get people to understand. You cannot walk in. You need to tailor it to your audience, whether that's a level, whether it's the type of person. You can't walk in with the same shtick and the same process and the same speech and the same tone to a different group of people. And it's the hardest thing for people to learn. They learn something, they've got it down pat, they've got to repeat it in the same tone and the same process. You have to learn how to talk to an audience. And whether that's an audience of 1,000 people in a gala boardroom, or whether it is 5 people in your boardroom in the office, you have to know your audience and who you're talking to. Flexible thinking, this has to be one of the keys. Leaders need to be open to paradox, juggling between priorities, holding opposing ideas in your head. It is constantly what differentiates you as a leader from everybody else is your ability to juggle priorities and find a way. Most people are looking to you to give them direction. They don't want to juggle. They don't want to think on multiple things. Find a way for them to do what they have to do. But hey, somebody's got to juggle that, and that's the leader. What else? Perspective seeking, coordinating. Research constantly shows that power reduces empathy and narrows focus. Take people's opinion, listen to them, follow what they're talking about, follow what they're doing. It doesn't mean you're going to use every piece of information, but the reality is the more you listen, the more you might find one piece that might be the element of something that's missing that you can't do and think about all of yourself. Disruption. You know what, guys? This show has been great on disruption. It's how do you think outside of the box? How do you continue to find that, blue ocean in a red ocean environment? How do you challenge the status quo? And finally, resilience, self-awareness. As a leader, you're expected to always be on call, constantly available to support employees. But you know what? I hate to say it, nobody really is going to turn back to you. So long as it's affecting them more, your mental health is going to be second to everybody else's. So you need to be resilient. You need to be self-aware. You need to be able to see what everybody else can't. And oh, by the way, you got to tuck away sometimes the way you're feeling.
Mike, let's get to our entrepreneur next. Alexandre Brunet is the co-founder of Pizza No. 900. Alexandre, welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
For those that don't know, and there aren't many in Montreal, but what is Pizza No. 900?
It would be a long story, but to make a long story short, I created something that I wish I had when I was younger, which I used to own a restaurant for 17 years, which was Restaurant Stromboli. And I was really young. I would have loved to have help. And the type of menu, what we're doing, it's actually my experience altogether that resulted in the creation of Pizzeria No. 900.
Doing a little research for the show, I was fascinated when I came across the head of research and development. Not something that people normally think of when they think of a restaurant chain in terms of research and development. You think of that more in a manufacturing environment. You think of that more in... Give us a little bit of an idea of what that entails, other than just, coming up with some great flavors. I mean, there's clearly more to it than that.
That, again, is sort of a long story. I started making pizza when I was 14 years old. So at the time, I didn't know that was going to be my life. So it's, those kind of first job where a friend calls you because there's somebody missing at the restaurant and they need help. And that's how it all started. It was an Italian restaurant where there was a pizzaiolo making pizza in front of the house. And I really loved being around people, so I didn't like being back in the kitchen. So that's how I started. And I know it sounds like a easy story, but I asked a friend to tell me where are the capers? Where does that come from? And he said, in the walk-in freezer. And I know it sounds funny, but the answer was, I don't know, but I buy it at the store. So what I mean by that is that every restaurant, they actually buy their stuff from a distributor, and they actually don't know the story of the product. Like I said, it's a 35-year experience that climbed up to something. And what I wanted to do is actually know from who we were buying. At first, it's a true story. I wanted to buy from Quebec, but the result of that was actually knowing the people that were actually doing the product, and it changed my life. And you'll say that's a big statement. Well, it actually did, because when you buy something, you need to know why, when, how, and if you want to have the best product at the best price, well, if you know the people that are doing it, to come back to the R&D guy, well, that's actually what he is doing. I've got an executive chef that's Italian, Mirko D'Agata, and I started that sort of experience alone, but then when the company grew, I had people to help, and that's what they started doing. So we buy the tomatoes from the region of Puglia in Italy. And this is, again, a true story. Mirko goes in Italy the 20th of August every year to follow the trail of the tomatoes. It's a true story. And to make sure that we've got the second sort of, je sais pas comment dire ça en anglais, la deuxième pousse des tomates.
The second crop.
So that way we know that we've got actually the best tomatoes at the best moment that qu'ils ont poussé. So this is only the story of the tomatoes, but and then Phil, what he does with the R&D is that he makes sure that every product that we use are bought from different area that are the best way transformed and used at the restaurant. I could tell you another example is that I had a restaurant for 17 years. I started a frozen pizza company, then I sold it, and then I started number 900. But while everything got going on, I met a lot of people, and I met Damien, which is our guy that are doing our charcuterie, and I've been 15 years that I've known him, and we together made the first prosciutto aged 18 months. But again, you need to understand that while you're doing tests, it takes actually 18 months to do a test. So imagine the time that it takes to actually come out with a nice and perfect product. So, and this is the story about R&D. It's like I said, I could go on and to explain, but I'm sort of a maniac on what product should be at the end and how to transform it, and that I think it's a part of what makes number 900 special.
Alexandre Brunet joins us, co-founder of Pizza Number 900. I mean, the quality control is obvious. Thinking back a couple of decades, you guys were pioneers. You were ahead of a wave in terms of upping the quality of pizza in Quebec and in Montreal. Let's be radically honest here, Alexandre. Pizza in Montreal a couple decades back was quite bad. I mean, it was really hard to find a decent slice.
Yeah, it's true. And again, I don't think it's even Italian immigrants, when they arrived and they started making pizza, they had to make the pizza with the ingredients that were available. So, I mean, and even the flour, I could actually do a pizza with different flours and with the same recipe, the same method. And one of the pizza could be great and the other one could be the worst pizza you ever ate. So we used to do the pizza with the ingredient that we had. So I think that's a major part of the quality that went up year after year. There's actually still artisans that are doing food the right, perfect way, and they've been doing it for thousands of years, which is, I think, superb. In our fast-moving business or business model where everything gets done and sold and so fast and copied, that cannot be copied. Like I told you, it takes 18 months to do only one test of a prosciutto. So it could take years and years and years to have the actual knowledge of how to do something. So this is something I actually find great.
I'm sorry, I got to say this. I can't get the picture of the Moody Tomato commercial out of my head thinking of your R&D guy, where the Moody Tomato guy is running behind and catching tomatoes that fall. So I feel this is what I see your R&D guy going on August 20th, chasing around the tomato trucks, but I digress. Found it very interesting. I'm going to take you back a second. I mean, you mentioned at 14 that this is something you knew that you were going to do. I don't know, but at 14 I was going to play pro hockey or pro baseball. I wasn't quite thinking about what that other career was going to be like. We live, we learn, we grow. You mentioned that you had Stromboli before. What did you learn from the Stromboli experience that you would not repeat going forward? And what are some of the vital points that you did learn? You go, hey, no matter where I go, this is what I have to take with me.
I think the restaurant business is hard. And at the same time, I truly believe that it's the greatest job or business to have. So what I wouldn't do, it's started alone, not having people that are actually working on stuff. A restaurant is combined service company with a transformation company. So, and it needs to work together. So I think it's in that way, it's probably the worst business to have because it needs to be perfect to work. So it's hard, but I always say I started my first restaurant, I was 21, and I believe that maybe the first year was actually not a job. I was actually having a lot of fun, but at the same time, it was really hard. And yes, I made some errors, but I don't think if I would be able to start again, I really think I would do exactly the same thing. I loved what I was doing. So if to my young self, I would say, do it again.
Dan, it's that common theme, right? It's love what you do, it's passion, it's so many different things, and that have to drive you forward, especially during those rough periods.
Mm-hmm. We hear this so often, from entrepreneurs. It's tough being a business owner. The toughest thing I've ever done. Would you change anything? No. I do the exact same thing all over. We were talking about the attention to detail, sourcing tomatoes all over Italy, his executive chef going to Italy to source those tomatoes, waiting 18 months to age the prosciutto correctly before rolling it out. I mean, the level of care and obsession is really, really interesting with pizza number 900. You're taking this concept elsewhere, in Ontario, in France. You're opening in Lyon soon. That to me is a gutsy move, especially going into really one of the great food capitals of the world and going back into Europe with some of that knowledge that you brought from Italy. Tell us about the bold move there, going into France, and your experience so far.
Well, I'm actually touching wood because went really well. In Ontario, we've been open for a month, and it was a blast. Lot of people coming. I think they were waiting for us, but who doesn't love pizza? And when it's well done, I think people will come and try it. So what I mean is that I think it's great that we started with en force, but I think the real challenge is to keep it that way. I usually don't get happy too fast. I think one of my philosophy is I always say that to people, I'm always scared. I'm able to live with that and being able to be happy in life, being scared. But being scared makes me stay on my guard and make sure that I'm not, being cocky or making sort of decision that, everything's fine. We're doing it. Let's not, écoute personne. No, we need to be careful, be scared, and make sure that everything will keep on going. So in Ontario, what we do always is when we start something, and when we say we, I'm not alone. I've got a partner, Dominique Bugeaud. You probably heard the last company that he started, which was a sushi shop. Like I told you, I was a restaurant owner for 17 years. I knew everything about pizza, but I didn't know anything about franchising. So that's why Dominique is there. And so what we do when we arrive in a new country and a new province is that we tell ourselves that we need to have a proof of concept. Even between Montreal and the city of Quebec, sometimes, there's some really known restaurant in Quebec that tried to open in Montreal, didn't work. And the same thing, success stories, restaurant of Montreal starting to start restaurant in Quebec and city, and it doesn't work. So that's why we say it's a proof of concept. Sometimes it's little changes that makes it work. So we're being careful. And me and Dominique, we have a philosophy where we don't want to go fast. We need to think of what we're doing, make sure it's stable, and then continue our development.
I think the concept of scared, as you call it, is really a strong grounding principle for a lot of entrepreneurs. And first of all, I don't think any successful entrepreneur isn't scared at some point. They may call it something different, but it's effectively the same thing. And I think it helps avoid this sense of entitlement, right? Oh, I've done so good, so I deserve to do well somewhere else. I think it's an environment that allows you to constantly be on your toes and constantly trying to be creative so that you don't settle. And I think for most entrepreneurs, settling is a really bad thing, at the end of the day. And I find it interesting listening to your story that, obviously you're going into areas. I know you have a partnership with Les Viandes Biologiques de Charlevoix. For most people thinking pizza, and yes, there are certain people that are thinking gluten-free, they're thinking, health-wise. I'm not always sure that people think of biological meat. So what's the partnership there, and how did that come about?
Well, really, je suis en admiration avec Damien for a lot of reasons. He's brilliant. He's an agronome, and everybody should know about this company. He should be. You guys should talk to that guy. He's incredible. I need to tell a short story. Again, I don't have a lot of time, but I need to explain. We were a lot of years ago. We were working actually on the push too, and I had some questions, and I called him, and it was they had a lot of noise in the background when I was talking to him, and I said, "What are you doing? What's that noise?" And he says, "Well, it's that time of year, so I'm on a moissonneuse batteuse." He was actually driving the moissonneuse batteuse. So
that's the harvesting tractor.
He's actually doing the food for the pigs. And so everything is linear. He does everything. So from the food to the charcuterie. And his biggest pride, and this is, I know it's something that, but it touches me. His biggest pride is that there's a river crossing his land, and his biggest reward in life is being able to still drink the water. I know it's maybe for some people they don't care. For me, when he was 5, he was drinking the water. Now he still can drink the water, and I think this is something that is so positive. And like I said earlier about the artisan, is that it's their respect the craft, and he's doing it. And so I'm really proud actually of doing business with that guy. And that's the reason I'm with him since, well, a lot of years. I don't remember exactly, but actually probably 15 years, something like that I've been buying from him.
That's impressive. I got to tell you, most of the water where I grew up in, if you could drink it at one point, certainly today you wouldn't even bathe in it, never mind drink it. So that's the world we're living in. So power there. One quick question, and it might be lost on a lot of people. I mean, you can cook a Neapolitan pizza in 90 seconds? That to me sounds like a great idea for mobile units.
Yeah, it's actually the right and the only way to cook Neapolitan pizza. It's actually in our certification. We have to cook it in 90 seconds. It's not a question of being fast, or it's the oldest type of pizza. We actually are doing it exactly the way that AVPN wants us to do it. So it's not a number 900 way of doing pizza. It's actually the Neapolitan way. So we are doing the classic. That's what I wanted when I started. I said, if I would do a pizzeria, I want to have only pizza on the menu, and we'll be the best at it. And we'll do the classic one, the original one, exactly the right way.
And Dan, now you see why I'm not allowed to cook. I was supposed to know that, but I didn't know that. So shows you what I know. Dan, go ahead. You ask a question now, because I just embarrassed myself on air. So go ahead.
Well, I got to get into the foodie question, obviously, Alexandre. So this you are doing, is this the certification that's officially coming from the region in Italy? So you're doing it to code?
Exactly, because the actual Neapolitan pizza is recognized by UNESCO now. And there's an association where they give certificate to restaurants that are applying exactly the right way of doing the pizza Napoletana. The only thing that's great about us is that we've been the first chain in the world to add it. And for me, it was a big thing, because I actually wanted it for a lot of years. And not that they didn't want, but they were saying that they want to make sure that every restaurant would apply the same regulation. And so it took actually 6 years to sort of make it happen. And now we're the first chain in the world to actually have the certification. And we still are the only one.
Beating out essentially competitors even in Italy to have the certification. You're going into France, into the rest of Canada. Where else are you looking, and how big is this project going to get?
There's a simple explanation about us wanting to go to the US, and it's really simple. In Canada, we're close to eating 1 kilogram of pizza every year. And in the US, they're actually eating close to 20 kilograms of pizza every year per person. So the market is extraordinary, because they are a bit more than 400 million, and in Canada, or 40 to be logical with our growth is that we need to go to the US. And but again, it's hard. We want to go slowly with that, but it's actually our main goal. We're going in 2025. We're going to a show in Florida to actually go have a talk with different franchisee and to start to study our growth in the US. That's our next plan. Yeah.
So interesting, you kind of walked right into the next question I was going to have for you, which is this discussion between corporate stores and franchise stores. Right now, are all your stores that you have, all the restaurants, corporate owned? And going into the U.S., would you maintain that model, or are you going to go into the franchise environment?
It's a philosophy that I've had. Even the first one wasn't corporate. The reason is that we actually want to have restaurants that are owned by an owner that takes care of his business. So we, the franchisor, we're like help to the franchisee, and we want them. It's the same model I've explained earlier. Is that I really loved having a restaurant when I was alone. I wanted people that actually loved being in the restaurant business, but didn't want to be alone and have the power to buy, to have an actual chef that is following the tomatoes, make sure that they have the best tomatoes. But this is the idea. So there has never been, and there will never be a corporate number 900. The only thing that's possible is that, we've got an operator that doesn't have enough money to sort of buy it all. We will be an associate of the operator. And so in that sense, yes, but there will never be a restaurant with an owner that's not actually working in the restaurant.
Just a funny personal question, because I've loved your pizza, eaten it many times, but I did recently develop an inflammation situation, so I have to reduce my dairy. Is there some R&D happening down the road to make really good dairy-free cheese, or because it's tough to find, I feel?
It's true that it's easy to find a non-dairy cheese that you don't have to melt. It's the melting part that's the problem, and we are actually working on it. And there's actually, and I won't say where, and I won't say who, but there's actually one of our competitors that actually did it, and it's not in Montreal, so he's not actually competing with us, or in Lyon, or in Ontario. But no, we are on it. We actually have a non-dairy cheese that we can offer, but I won't say that it's the best, because I've seen what that competitor, what he did. And yes, I think I can honestly say that we are doing the best thing that we can, but you found the only thing that I don't find perfect. It's actually something that we want to be able to do in the next year. So,
well, I believe in you, because no one else is doing it very well anyway at this point. So you've got time.
Yeah,
I love corporate espionage, Dan. Love it.
Our guest is Alexandre Brunet, founder of Pizza Number 900. We'll have his one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs coming up. But first, let's check in with our BDO specialist. And Mike, you are the lead, actually, National Corporate Development at BDO Canada. So let's just have you as our expert this week on tipping. This is a really hot issue in politics in America, as well as on the ground. And this might have reverberations in Canada as well. It actually started with a Donald Trump campaign promise to get rid of taxes on tips. He has this story that he told about a waitress who was saying how much she was taxed on his tips, and he decided to make this a policy. Kamala Harris then matched that promise to get rid of tax on tips. That's how the conversation seemed to be getting going, right? Where are we now, and do you think this kind of relief could come to workers in restaurants in Canada?
Well, I think we got a number of things at play here. One, I think the discussion of tips in Canada has already kind of played its way into our dialogue in the last little while. Obviously, one of the things that sparked here in Quebec recently was the provincial government's suggestion that they were going to push for the tip being calculated on pre-tax amount, because most restaurants now, when you go in, your 15, 18, 20% is a function of the total bill, which includes the tax. So, from a user perspective, that's good news. I think from the individuals on the other side, those that are working, there are implications, obviously, of what that means in terms of reduced tip, since the amount is not going to be the same, though I guess you could argue that if somebody gives 18 in one case or 15 in another case, it's going to come out to the same thing. But I think it's a much bigger discussion in terms of what does that mean for wait staff? What does it mean in terms of taxation? Do I think we are going to find our way as the U.S. is discussed at this point? No, I don't think so. I mean, I'll get nerdy for you here for a second and basically read from the CRA website. Restaurant and bar servers, hairdressers, valet, taxi drivers, and others who earn tips need to be sure those amounts are included as income when they file their tax returns and benefits returns. If you receive tips or gratuities as part of the type of work you do, this information is for you. Keep track of all your tips and gratuities received throughout the year. Calculate the total amount received between Jan 1, December 31. Report the total amount received on your income tax return and benefit returns. And in Canada, the law is clear about the treatment of income received from tips and gratuities. All tips and gratuities are taxable, and it is your responsibility to track and report any received amounts. So, the discussion of tip has played into, certainly in the restaurant business, for a long time. Should everything be all inclusive like it is in Europe? How does that affect employment? How does that affect wages? How does that affect minimum wage? I mean, it's not as simple as just saying, it's a tip, right? At the end of the day, I've had friends over the years that that lived and died for many years on tips, and that was their way to survive. And I think for a lot of people, we take it for granted. The U.S. side of this is an interesting one, because while this has been a proposal in what has been and continues to be a very turbulent presidential election, there's a lot of naysayers right now in the U.S. that think that this is going to have, as much as it's going to be a positive on one side, that there's a lot of negativity that coming with it. And you know what? How would it work in the U.S.? I mean, basically, you got to look at three different choices. Are you going to change the definition of a tip on the IRS code at the end of the day so that they're not treated as income as all, or continue to define tips as income, provide an exemption, or continue to define tips as income and initially include tips, but provide for a deduction? This is just, we've once again taken a situation that affects people's lives and made this into another 40-page Bible in terms of how we're going to treat things, while we're not actually having a positive effect on the economy. And yeah, Dan, I'm going to correct you. This was not the specialist. This is more of the opinionated view today than it is of a specialist.
Well, let me get your specialist out here, because there is some compliance issues, and a new bill in Quebec does address tipping from a very narrow perspective. So they have tabled a bill a few weeks ago that regulates how merchants actually can put the tip on the bill. You're not supposed to do it after the tax, right? You're supposed to do it before the tax. So minor thing there, but certainly worth noting for compliance, especially with people's point of sale systems.
It definitely, I mean, there is that compliance element to it, which, obviously leads to a taxation element to it. But, for me, the bigger concern is, what does this mean from an employment perspective for individuals? Are the employees, big question mark, are the employees already getting 100% of those tips, or are they not getting them? Well, does that mean that an individual is going to, even if we stop the taxation, does that mean that salaries are going to go down? Because an individual, is now making tax-free money, so, why should we pay them as much? So there's much deeper implications on all of this, and this is, like I said, it's a typical, approach to a matter that we've brought ourselves into a situation by overcompliance that we would like to make some changes to, and as we see, once you dig yourself into a deep hole, it ain't so easy to get out of.
If a server is given a $50 bill, a $100 bill cash for great service quietly on the side, is that something that you would expect the server to declare?
Can I go quiet? Can I plead the fifth here? According to the law, 100%. Is that what happens? I don't know.
right? I mean, everybody has their own approach to dealing with things, but according to the way the law is worded right now, 100% that amount has to be declared. Because if you go back to what I said to you, is you're responsible to keep track of what you earned. Right? It's not your employer's job, it's your job to keep track of it. So we throw the onus back on the server.
Mike Newton, National Corporate Development Lead at BDO Canada. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And as we come to the end of our show, let's turn to our entrepreneur, Alexandre Brunet, founder of Pizza Number 900, and ask him for his one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs. Alexandre, what do you think?
This is something my father used to say to me a lot, is that even if you're really occupied and you've got a lot going on in a business or a startup, you're always in it. And so you need to take time to reflect and to think and, do yoga. I don't know. But I think in your schedule, people should take half an hour and just, have your eyes on in the sky and think, when people start reflecting or thinking of things, taking a break. This helps a lot on growing a business or reflecting on what I should or should not do, and actually makes you be sure you're not doing any error in your daily decisions.
Alexandre, about 25 years ago, somebody gave me the expression working on versus working in your business. And I think that's essentially what you're talking about. And for 19 years, I was managing partner at FL Full Orlando. And I would tell you that my greatest moments of reflection were travel. Whether I was traveling to a business event, whether I was traveling on a plane to go on vacation, that opportunity to extract yourself and to look at the business big picture is a huge thing that most people forget about. They get so deeply ingrained in what they're doing that they forget to take time and step back and look. And don't get me wrong, this is not about taking back and smelling the roses. And this is about taking a completely different perspective on what you're doing and what you should be doing from a 30,000-foot perspective. So I totally agree with you.
And this is, I could even say something else, because it's one of my philosophy, where staff of mine, they ask me for a vacation now, and vacation is really a part of our philosophy in this business. Actually being on a vacation, when you come back, you go faster or you work better. So it makes you better. So you better go on vacation a lot and come back rejuvenated and happy, and then you'll be working well and hard. And some people have difficulty finding that spot where, when you work a lot, always after a while, you start actually not doing something important or being efficace. You're just there.
So, Alexandre, if you're in an organization with unlimited vacation time, you have to recruit people that are passionate about the product, just as passionate and maybe even obsessive as you are. So clearly that is the case. Congratulations on your success. Pizza Number 900 now expanding in Ontario and France and remains, this is incredible. We learned this on the show, the only certified Napoletana pie franchise in the entire world, based right here in Quebec. So congratulations, Alexandre. It's a great story.
Thank you very much.
Think Big. TNKR Media. Good talk.